Guys, today we're going to be going over our complete guide for Onslaught Salvation. Now keep in mind, this is different than our previous version of Onslaught. Everything from the maps, to the enemies that are present, to the defensive tools that are given to us, Onslaught Salvation is definitely different from regular Onslaught. Now fundamentally, it's still the same. It's still a horde mode. There's still 50 waves, each wave getting progressively harder. There's a normal version and an expert version, with the expert version giving you substantially more rewards. Today, guys, we're going to be focusing on expert, how to optimize, how to get through this activity, and also some weapon choices that are going to make killing that final boss much easier. First up, let's talk about those new enemies. This version features the Scorn and Shadow Legion Cabal. Now we're kind of like in the same debate as we were with the previous version of Onslaught, which is like which one is easier or better to go against. Some are saying right now that the Scorn is better than the Cabal because of the drop pods. I will say the drop pods are pretty annoying. I don't care how strong you are. If you're standing under one of those things, you die. Now we also have these 3 new maps, well, at least new for Onslaught. One of them being Widow's Court, which is a PvP map. The other one being Eventide Ruins, which is actually a landing zone in Europa. And then we have Kel's Grave, which is an old Gambit map that we used to have on the Reef. Now out of these maps, they're all pretty good. Widow's Court is actually my favorite because I just like the way the enemies spawn in and they're really consolidated. However, Eventide Ruins is going to be the easiest. At least at the moment of making this guide, Expert Eventide is capped at 2010 power rather than the usual 2065, meaning when you begin the activity, the enemies don't even show swords. Personally, I think it's kind of a snooze though. I like the Widow's Court version. It's a lot more challenging. However, we don't know how long this is going to remain, so if you're looking just purely to get through this activity and get rewards, by all means, take advantage of Eventide Ruins. Now, we also have some new defenses in their iteration of Onslaught. There's an operatable turret. This is straight from the moon from Destiny 1, but there are 3 tiers to this turret. Now, previously, I wasn't that crazy about the turret. However, when I fully upgraded it to tier 3, fellas, it puts out, I'm talking like waves 40 plus, was shredding targets. It also has scorching rounds, which means it could synergize with solar. Now, the tier 1 and tier 2 version, they're okay. I mean, the tier 2 version, you see these little changes here. There's like a protective face shield that gets added. It also seems like each tier doesn't overheat as easily, but there is a play to be made with the tier 3 turret, so much so that I'm considering doing a solo run with like a tether, placing it, then getting inside of the turret, and then just going to Pound Town. What I will say though is space out your shots. Don't just lay on the trigger. You can't necessarily tap fire because it has to ramp up, similar to like Sweet Business, which is in between kills, let go of the trigger, let it cool back down, and then spin it back up again. Now, our other new defense is an airstrike. Now, you have 3 that you and your team can pick up and mark an area on the ground for it to strike. And the great part about the airstrike is that it won't launch the airstrike until enemies walk over the area that you marked. Now, the tier 2 version of the airstrike beam gets an arc lightning beam, and then at tier 3, you get a much larger AoE effects. No lie, guys, considering just how strong these defenses are, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in like Act 2 or something like that, Bungie picks things up by either making all 50 waves harder or potentially even just giving us more waves. Maybe it goes to wave 60 or 70. But considering how potent these defenses are, I think we can pull it off. Now, aside from those, we also have the classic things like decoys, which can be upgraded to shacks at tier 3. You also have your normal turrets that you don't need to control. There's also tripwires, which got a massive upgrade. They are now stasis and will slow combats. And once they're fully upgraded, they'll shoot out stasis crystals, which is very nice. Again, everything here is pointing toward ramping up the difficulty here of Onslaught. Now, moving on to our combat modifiers. We need to take a look at the new round augments and the bonus objectives. Let's start with the latter. Bonus objectives evolved just a bit from the original Onslaught, with completed objectives spawning a heavy ammo crate. Now, we still have the capture point objective, this time needing to capture a Scorn totem that spawns on the map. Now, the speed wave also returns, which will task us with clearing the round as quick as possible. We also have the collect 20 motes objective, but for new stuff, we have a bonus objective requiring you to heal the ADU 4 separate times. We have a new one that wants us to run through 4 pillars of light that are scattered around the map, and then the last one that we encountered was a challenge to kill the waves champion in a certain amount of time. Now, most of these are pretty straightforward, but I did find the timers to be much tighter than the old Onslaughts. On top of that, we have the new round augments. These are what happens on waves 3 and 9 of every 10 levels. There's a Husk Horde augment that spawns a number of yellow bar husks that try and rush you down, a shielded Grim Harbinger, which is where a beefy target appears that will constantly spawn swarms of Grims to attack the ADU. You'll need to use the ether cannons that spawn in at the same time, and then there's another Grim Harbinger augment, where we get 3 enemies that spawn on the map with markers above them, requiring you to leave the ADU to dispatch them. We also have the ether shielded Bulwarks, which spawn a bunch of immune enemies that will then rush the ADU. Here the ether cannons return, which you'll need to use to take down the shields. Now we also have the 2 boss wave augments, with a pair of demolitionists returning that spawn pretty much on top of the ADU. And then the last augment that we encountered was the subjugator augment, which essentially takes the place of the tormentor one. Now let me just say, the subjugator in my opinion is substantially easier than the tormentor. The tormentor resulted in multiple wipes in the previous Onslaught version. This subjugator, even at these light levels or power levels, in my opinion is much more manageable. Now as far as where special rounds are concerned, we have the objective on every 6th wave that requires us to free some capture and listening and also kill some scorned barons. This is actually surprisingly harder than the wave 6 waves in the previous Onslaught. Essentially though, you want to go inside each of these totem fields, shoot above the cage, and then when you kill a baron, you have to follow and destroy the drop totem or he will respawn. It's kind of an annoying mechanic because there's so many enemies in this room that I have found myself wiping here. There's just Grim everywhere, constantly shooting you. I would say in the previous wave 6 waves in Onslaught, that was kind of like, hey, let's split up. Let's each go kill a mini boss, meet back in the middle, and then get the Rift Slam. This one, in my opinion, you almost kind of want to stay together or at least relatively close as these ads really do shred. And I even find myself popping my super here just to stay alive. Now this takes us to the boss rooms themselves. Again, this is every 10th wave. And the difference between this boss room and the original Onslaught is that it puts you right into things. There are places that you can kind of get cover, but there are ads spawning everywhere. This room is definitely all about overwhelming you. Now there are also augments that can spawn enemies that drop ether cannons. There's an augment that will spawn 3 totems around the arena, with each one dealing damage to the boss when destroyed. And there's also an augment that requires you to capture 3 pillars of light, which once you complete this will give you something called the ether boost buff. Now this buff is extremely broken. It removes the cooldown on all of your abilities besides your super. And when I say removes the cooldown, I mean completely removes the cooldown. If you're on prismatic, you can throw your prismatic grenade over and over. I would say out of the 3 though here, the only one I wouldn't go out of my way to complete is the ether cannon one. The other 2 though are very, very good, guys. Prioritize those. They make these boss rooms substantially easier. God, that's nuts. Oh! What? I didn't even know you could get this. So in this version too, there is a heat wave bonus round version, except for this one, instead of it being unlimited tormentors, it's actually subjugators. And they are very, very strong. Now, before we jump into our tips for completing Onslaught, I do want to go over a brief look at the rewards. Every 10 waves, you'll get a chest that drops an Onslaught Salvation weapon. And if you're on Expert, you'll get 2 of these chests. And the weapons present currently are Vantage Point, Bittersweet, Exuviate, Liturgy, Insurmountable, and Sovereignty. Now, on top of that, these chests can also give a ton of reagents. We put out an entire guide on how to begin tonic crafting and collecting reagents, but TLDR, play Onslaught, and you get a ton of reagents. Now, you can also get even more reagents from bonus objectives if you have the performance bonus major field work complete. Do that one, guys, and you'll net yourself even more ingredients. Again, check out our seasonal guide if you haven't already. Now, the last bit of loot, though, comes from rounds 30 and plus. This is where any weapon that drops have a chance at being a quote-unquote shiny. Now, unfortunately, the shiny variant of these weapons have no physical differences. There's no difference in looks. It's not like our shiny variants from Into the Light, which in my opinion is a huge bummer. What is different though is the double perks. Here you can have an opportunity to get a weapon with 2 traits in either column. Again, keep in mind, guys, these weapons are not craftable. Kind of like Into the Light, the only way to get these weapons are as drops. Now, on top of that, when you complete wave 50, this will spawn 1 more chest than usual. And to take this even further, if you have the enriching tonic active, you'll see extra weapons, armor drops. These tonics activate on kills or on activity completions. Now, someone brought up the other day that tonics are really annoying because they have time durations. And normally by the time they get toward the end of Onslaught, their tonics run out. Guys, you can go into your inventory right here while you're in Onslaught and slot your tonics. As soon as they run out, you actually get a prompt that says, hey, your tonic is out. So in between a wave, you can throw back on whatever tonic you want. Matter of fact, something that was completely missed in the patch notes the other day was that you can access your vault at any point. Guys, if you're in the middle of any activity now in Destiny, Onslaught included, included. Literally go into your inventory, hit the button to access your vault, and boom, you can pull things out of your vault. You can also slot things into your vault from the various loot that's dropping from this activity. Now, with all that being said, let's now move into our tips for completing Expert Onslaught, considering it does have double loot and it's the most efficient way to engage with this episode. We're going to cover strategies throughout the waves, how to deal with certain augments, and what classes and builds work the best. The first thing to note is that it's powered enabled. More specifically, Expert is power level 2065, unless you're doing the Eventide version. When we were playing at the beginning of this week though, we were about 60 levels under, which would make it very difficult if you're not optimized. Now, as the season goes on or this episode goes on, you're going to be leveling up, you're going to be getting more power levels, therefore it's going to make this activity easier. You can hit that pinnacle cap if you want, get to 2010, take advantage of those artifact bonuses. All of these will be raising your power level, allowing you to tank more damage from enemies and also deal more damage. Now, the enemies do get harder as waves progress, and it seems that wave 50 is actually 2065, with wave 1 starting around 2040. Now, as difficult as it may sound, turns out with the right build, guys, you'll be just fine. We have a Warlock build coming out if it's not already out, and it completely wrecks Onslaught. And this is me at like 2006 or 2007 power. Like, I'm substantially under leveled here. Now, the first tip is actually to look though at your modifiers. Here you're gonna see the weekly boss and any enemy modifiers that are very important. Things like fake ammo bricks that they actually just removed. And yes, you heard that right. There were fake ammo bricks. There were actually fake ammo bricks and fake Ingrams. You would see an exotic Ingram out there and you thought it was a drop, and when you walked over it, it was a bomb. And let me just say, they did a lot of damage and it could insta-kill you and your entire team. Now, the other important thing to note is the self-build crafting section with things like overcharged weapons or abilities, these things that you can lean into. Also, any weapon with an anti-champion mod benefits from the overcharged modifier. We're talking 25% more damage just being tacked on for having on the mod. It's not just the weapons that you see here, guys. Now, when you look at this whole menu, take note of things that can cater to your build. These will assist massively, and they will change week to week. Now, the first tip in the game, in my opinion, is to save your scrap. Don't blow your scrap in the earlier levels. Save it for those later levels. This doesn't mean you have to purchase nothing, but just get one of something. Maybe just a decoy, but save the bulk of your scrap for those later levels. Personally, I think that decoys are still really, really good. I also think that tripwires are very good and worth buying. Then after those, you got unmanned turrets, airstrike, and even your man turrets. Even though I really do like the tier 3 version of the man turrets, it takes so much commitment to get to that point that I wouldn't really do that unless you just have a ton of scrap lying around. Now, our next tip is about bonus objectives. In my opinion, you need to do them. You get free heavy on top of the reagent rewards, which is super helpful. But a couple things to note about the heavy crate is that it will despawn at the end of the next buy phase, which means you should try to pick it up after you come back from killing the Scorn Barons, because this affords you the ability to use all of your heavy on them. This is going to help you manage your ammo economy here, guys. Next up comes from wave augments. This is more of a reminder of how important it is to pay attention to them. If you're not prepared to take the shields off the ether bulwarks, they will swarm the ADU while you can't do anything. The same goes if you're out of position when the demolitionists show up. So make sure you're near the ADU and keep an eye out on what you get for each wave 3 and wave 9. Now, similarly, with augments and special waves, we have boss rooms. Remember that you can get a rally banner before entering, which means you can have loadouts ready for this specifically. You don't have to rock the same loadout throughout all of Onslaught. You can have a DPS loadout and you can have an ad clear loadout. Now, inside, these rooms don't have many safe spots. Again, this puts you right into the thick of things. So it's not as clear cut as the previous version of Onslaught, where you could sit in the back of the map with Whisper the Worm and nuke bosses. You're gonna have to do kind of 2-in-1, where you're also doing damage to the boss, but clearing the room at the same time. I personally think that Tether's really good here. Song of Flame is also good. Glacial Quake is good because it hits not only the boss, but groups of enemies. But I would say the most important thing is taking advantage of the boss augments. Getting unlimited abilities helps a ton in this room. I feel like for the most part, people in the OG version of Onslaught didn't even worry about this, but we're talking free damage here, free ability boosts. These things are worth the extra time in this boss room. Now, a unique tip, at least for this week, for the wave 50 boss, we have a subjugator. Guys, if you're ever against a subjugator, use microcosm. My loadout pretty much stays the same throughout the entire Onslaught Salvation, except on wave 50. I will swap to microcosm, primarily because microcosm does extra damage against subjugators. You can pop your super. This, of course, feeds into microcosm, amping that damage up even more. If you and the squad are rocking microcosm, you guys are gonna shred here. And if you don't have microcosm, don't worry, we got a guide on that too. Now, for my final tips, in terms of subclasses and playstyles. If there's one thing you need to do to succeed in this this activity, it's to have a good build. We're gonna have a deeper video specifically for Onslaught builds that are gonna be very good here. Essentially the best builds so far. Now you can go with some of the OG builds, things like Tether Hunters with Orpheus Rigs. I was also doing a Stasis Titan build the other day, which was pretty good. I was doing a Warlock build, which was very good with Bleak Domain, which was wrecking everyone. Now, if you have a really, really good build for Onslaught, feel free to come by our stream. We actually have build battles going on right now where you will nominate one of your builds to go against someone else's build. And right there on the spot, guys, we see who has the better build. The winner gets 3,000 silver and the loser gets banned from the stream. Now, by the way, this is not a permanent ban. We literally just ban you and then unban you right back. I've had so many people drop by and say they will never submit anything for build battles because they don't want to get banned. Guys, understand, it's for theatrics. We're not literally banning you, at least not permanently. So guys, that is our Onslaught Salvation Guide. Let me know in the comments below if we missed anything. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.